So we're thrilled to have Dr. Richard Lilley with us today. He's the co-founder of Project Seagrass. Project Seagrass is dedicated to advancing the conservation of seagrass through education, influence, research, and action. And the project is focused on seagrass restoration efforts with an incredible ongoing project called Seagrass Ocean Rescue, which Dr. Richard Lilley will tell us more about. So that's it for me. Dr. Lilley, the floor is yours.
Well, first of all, guys, good morning, and thank you for taking the time to listen to me this morning. It's always nice to speak to people about Seagrass Meadows. Not many people want to listen, but I think we're getting there with that. So I guess really, before we start, I wanted to sort of give an outline as to how we've got where we've got to, and pretty much give people a bit of an outline of what Seagrass Meadows are and what they do. When I'm 36 now, and when I set up Project Seagrass 7 years ago with my then supervisor at Swansea University and a mate of mine from the dive club, the thing that struck me was no one had ever heard of Seagrass Meadows. They just really weren't on the agenda in any of the documents that we were seeing globally, any of the future we want documents, let's say from Rio, or basically in the international conversation, conservation conversation, they just weren't there. And that kind of blew my mind because, and I understood why. I'd never heard of Seagrass Meadows either. You know, my background is as a diving instructor and as a secondary school science teacher, as a biology teacher, and I spent a lot of time in the sea, and I spent a lot of time, learning biology in school and at university. And Seagrass Meadows I'd never heard about either. And so I turned up to Swansea University and started reading my supervisor's papers and was blown away by how important these habitats are, and yet no one had heard of them. So in many respects, I thought that at that point, Seagrass has a marketing issue. It has an issue where people aren't aware of it. There's a lack of education around Seagrass Meadows. And so we set up Project Seagrass to try and communicate some of his papers, essentially, into mediums that weren't in scientific papers, but that the public could engage with. So we started off doing, visits to schools, visits to science festivals, so like Edinburgh and Glasgow Science Festival, Swansea, the British Science Festival. And it's just a way of trying to communicate what Seagrass Meadows were, why they're important, and why we should all care about them. And since then, so I found it when I was doing my master's, and I did a PhD at Cardiff University. So I did my first master's at Swansea, second master's at Cardiff, and then my PhD at Cardiff as well. But during that time of me being a student, we've kind of built on Project Seagrass in our spare time, communicated some of the work I was doing academically then, and my colleagues were doing academically. And that coincided with the sort of growth of social media. So, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. And so what we were able to do is sort of communicate some of the field work we were doing, and that gained a bit of interest, because if you're taking photos of seagrass in Greece, it looks good on Instagram. So, you're able to get a different audience that way. And then so it's just growing really in partnership with Swansea and Cardiff universities and that sort of academic side of things. And then, like was mentioned in the introduction, I guess the thing that we've become most known for, although this isn't by any means what Project Seagrass is seagrass restoration. And so that's what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about today, about this one specific project called Seagrass Ocean Rescue, which was a partnership with Swansea University and Sky Ocean Rescue, WWF there, but also where that's taken us and where we're going. I was told yesterday that we've been awarded supporting partner status to the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. So it's quite exciting news for us as an organisation, but that's really a reflection of the direction that we're taking, especially in the UK, when it comes to restoring some of our coastal habitats. So the sort of I guess the team here then is Project Seagrass as an NGO. We are a charity based in South Wales. We've got registered as a charity in England and Wales, registered as a charity in Scotland, and we're linked or we collaborate closely with these Cardiff and Swansea University. But we've also got a strategic partnership with WWF to restore seagrass meadows in the UK over the next 10 years. The title for today is Gardening Under the Sea and Bringing Biodiversity Back to Our Oceans. I'm going to talk to you about the benefits of seagrass meadows for carbon sequestration, for sediment stabilisation, for fisheries productivity, but one of the big things which I want to champion with regards to seagrass meadows is the biodiversity benefits. I get a lot of phone calls at the moment from various organisations who want to hit their net zero targets, and that's great. And they want to offset their emissions by putting nature back. But fundamentally, that's quite a narrow lens with which to look at restoration. And so hopefully I can try and champion some of the other reasons why we should be thinking about restoring nature and bringing back some of what we might refer to as natural capital. So, and for some reason now we're going to find, there we go. So like I said, it's 2021 to 2030 is the UN decade on ecosystem restoration. So this was officially adopted on the 1st of March 2019. The 1st of March is the unofficial World Seagrass Day as well, so that was quite nice for us. But essentially the UN has taken, and this is being led by UNEP and the United Nations Environmental Programme and the FAO, so the Food and Agricultural Organization of the UN. It's being co-led by those two, I guess, bodies within the UN. And it's a big movement for this decade to be a decade where we restore nature. A lot of when we think about restoring nature is in relation to the terrestrial environment. So, we often we hear a lot about tree planting. It's something that which people are familiar with. Again, if we think about some of the conversations I'm having with corporates at the moment, why plant seagrass when we can just plant more trees? But fundamentally, nature is more than trees, and we need to have interconnected landscapes. So we need to have habitats that link together and that are connected and that support organisms and biodiversity at different stages of those individuals' life cycles. And it's exactly the same in the sea. So one of the things that we learn early on in sort of tropical marine ecology courses are the importance of mangroves, seagrass meadows and coral reefs and the connectivity between those. If on a tropical island you cut down all the mangroves, then suddenly 3 or 4 or 5 species from the coral reef will disappear. And that's not because they can no longer live on the coral reef. It's just that they'll never make it to the coral reef because their nursery habitat has disappeared. And it's the same with seagrass meadows. So, if you're a small fish or a small crustacean, so you're physically quite diminutive, seagrass meadows are a brilliant place to hide. As humans, we're going to find it hard to hide in grass, but we can hide in the forest. But if we were the size of a giraffe, we'd find it harder to hide in the forest. So it's, this idea of scale is important as well. So yeah, the main focus one decade that I would particularly encourage you to look at is this UN decade on ecosystem restoration. The hashtag's Generation Restoration. The official launch of this is going to be on World Environment Day on the 5th of June. But there's a lot of sort of pre-launch conversations happening right now. So I would encourage you to engage with that decade. A second decade with which we're involved, but which isn't so, I guess, public facing, is the UN decade on ocean science for sustainable development. Restoration of seagrass meadows and coral reefs and habitats, really, from a scientific perspective, is still in its infancy. We've still got a lot to learn. What I'm going to talk to you about today is the first full-scale project or seagrass restoration project in the UK. There's 2 hectares of seagrass, but we need to restore 3,000 hectares of seagrass, or 30 kilometres squared or more, perhaps, of seagrass meadows. So we've got a long way to go, and we've got a lot to learn in terms of how we can improve the economics of it. But we're at the start of that curve, and there's been a lot of interest in helping us get there. So hopefully, I can be giving this talk in 5 years' time with some more good news stories. So if I move on, how the UN, these UN decades tie into the sort of global movement, and I'm not too sure how much you are familiar with this, is the Sustainable Development Goals. So I'm speaking today from Scotland, so a lot of the information we're going to be speaking to you about, I guess, is some of the organisations that are happening from a Scottish context. But the Sustainable Development Goals are the follow-on from the Millennium Development Goals. And these are goals which are designed to mean something to everyone. So, you know, from quality education to no poverty to climate action to life below water. These goals are designed so that organisations, governments, institutions and individuals can get on board with trying to address some of the challenges surrounding sustainable development. I've noticed that in different nations, there's different conversations at different levels about this. Certainly my work up here in Scotland with ScotGov and the institutions in the NGO sector up here, a lot of the discussions are framed around these goals. So, you know, what is that you're doing that is contributing towards these goals? And that's, for me, quite a positive environment to be in, because from Project Seagrass perspective, it's the SDGs that have framed us from the outset. You know, when we first decided to set up Project Seagrass and started to shape our strategy, we were looking at what we were doing and what, I guess, our ideology was, and how we could contribute towards meeting some of these challenges. One of the goals that has struck me as being important, and which isn't really a direct goal in and of itself, but is this number 17 here at the bottom, which is partnerships for the goals. We're increasingly seeing unusual partnerships for restoration in the UK, for example. So to give you an example, outside of Seagrass, up in the Dornoch Firth in Scotland, there's a project, a collaboration between Cardiff University, led by Bill Sanderson, Glenmorangie, which is a whisky distillery, and the Marine Conservation Society. And so that's a corporate partnership to fund restoration activities, so to fund the restoration of the native oyster in the Dornoch Firth. That's quite an unusual partnership, and you might say, okay, well, whiskey and oysters, I can see how that goes together. But you know, if we look at Sky Ocean Rescue, or the Sky Group, Sky and Seagrass, you know, where do they normally fit together? But you know, they've partnered towards this this goal, and they're funding and having a huge sort of communication drive around net zero, and actually within the organisation making some big strides towards net zero too. So it's interesting. It's been an interesting change really, where we're sitting at that, or operating that space between the sort of industrial or corporate world and the scientific world, and trying to really drive applied science rather than just science for its own sake, if that makes sense. So I think we'll see quite a few of these interesting collaborations going forward. And there's a few definitely in the pipeline, but I can't say anything about them just yet. So in terms of Seagrass then, so where does that fit into these SDGs? So every time I click on moving the screen on, there's a delay. So 2 species in Scotland. So around the world, there's, depending on which scientist you speak to, there's 70 species of seagrass globally. We are in a fairly an area of the world which is perhaps lacking in biodiversity with regards to seagrass. There's only the 2 species that exist in the waters around the UK. On the right hand side here, you see dwarf eelgrass, or Zostera nolti. This tends to be found quite high up on the intertidal, so it's an important seagrass for migratory bird species, so things like Brent geese and widgeon. But it's also being a plant, it fosters biodiversity in and of itself. That's as I say, an important sort of species on that high intertidal, but it tends to be not what we're working with, and it's definitely not what we're looking to restore at the moment, although restoration projects for this are being pipelined for elsewhere in the UK, just not through Project Seagrass. The species on the left-hand side here, Zostera marina, is the species that we're particularly interested in, because it's this species that has more carbon sequestering potential. It's the species which contributes to fisheries, so species like plaice, cod, bib, whiting might spend their juvenile years in seagrass meadows. So we call it a nursery ground for those species. And it's this species which, I guess, for us will give us the, in terms of if we're going to prioritise restoring one of those 2 species, this is the one that's really going to bring back those biodiversity benefits to our coastal seascapes. These 2 species in Scotland. These 2 species actually occur around the rest of the UK as well. So why does seagrass matter? So we've recorded so far over 50 species of fish in British seagrass meadows. Now, when you do any scientific study, you tend to choose a few sites, and a lot of the work that we've done has been in Welsh waters. There's been increasing amounts of work done on seagrass meadows in the southwest of England, and there's really beginning quite a surge now in terms of looking at. That's my daughter in the background. It's all right, no worries. There's been increasing number of studies taking place in Scottish waters too. So I would imagine that figure would go up. And one of the reasons for that is we get this latitudinal gradient in the UK. If you think about Shetland, the species that we're going to find living in seagrass meadows in the Shetland Isles are going to be very different to those that we are finding in Jersey and Guernsey, or in Cornwall. The water temperature is different, the amount of light you get through each day is different, and so the species assemblages, what we're going to find in those seagrass meadows, are different. There's a few species I've deliberately put on here. In the bottom left, you've got an Atlantic cod. In England and Wales in particular, fish on a Friday is a tradition, and traditionally that was the Atlantic cod. Historically, it's been a hugely important commercial species, and stocks are much lower. Historically, they collapsed basically compared to what they used to be. But with managed fishing, hopefully we can see those rebuild to their historic levels. But the traditionally very important food fish, and so making the link between commercially important fish species is one way of leveraging for support for maintaining intact nearshore habitats and in particular seagrass. And then on the right hand side here we've got seahorses. So seahorses are charismatic species. We've got a series of t-shirts you can buy, and the one that sells the most is the one with the seahorse on. So we've got Project Seagrass t-shirts with cod, plaice, pipefish, seahorses, but the one that comes off the shelves all the time is the seahorse. It's just one of those species that connects with people, so we call it a flagship species. And people might not necessarily want to preserve seagrass because it's just they might see it as grass underwater, but suddenly if it's the home of the seahorse, it garners a lot more attention. So understanding what makes people tick, and again going back to this idea of marketing the habitat, is an important tool for conservation. The other elements, and this is becoming increasingly spoken about, and we're having lots of conversations about this at the moment, is this carbon sequestering element of seagrass meadows. So globally, we have this figure here. So despite covering only 0.1% of the ocean floor, the seagrass meadows are highly efficient carbon sinks, storing up to 18% of the world's oceanic carbon. One thing that I'm constantly discussing, I guess, is the relative contributions of different seagrass species to carbon sequestration. So seagrasses come in all shapes and sizes. There is a species or genus which is found in Australia and in the Mediterranean called Posidonia. And that is, I guess, the equivalent of the oak tree, let's say, of the seagrass world. It's a long-lived species. It takes a long time to grow. When it's damaged, it takes a long time to recover. But that species is an enormous carbon store. So in terms of meeting climate change targets, if we can work out how to restore Posidonia oceanica in the Mediterranean effectively, and if we can do similar for Posidonia australis in the southern hemisphere, that is going to be a huge asset in the climate change fight. But then we also have other smaller species. These are small, like Halophila is one of the genuses, which are tiny spade-like grasses. They're sort of short and stumpy. They're rich in carbohydrates. You've also got things like turtle grass, manatee grass. These are much smaller species, more diminutive, but rich in carbohydrates. And they're important for flagship species like the turtle, the manatee, the dugong, but they don't have that same carbon sequestering capacity. So a lot of the headlines that are seen around seagrass meadows are often relating to this Mediterranean species or the Australian species, and not to the species we have here in the UK or to some of these smaller species. So one of my jobs at the moment, working with colleagues, is to try and collate carbon sequestration figures for the UK and try and help get those actually captured. So at the moment we're using figures from Denmark and Finland. We've got a few in the UK, but to be sure on what we're talking about in terms of carbon sequestration in the UK, essentially more science is needed. And that's something that we're looking to address in the next few years. One of the things that is clear is that, we've lost seagrass. And so in terms of whether we're talking about fisheries benefits or carbon sequestration, or whether we're talking about sediment stabilization or biodiversity gains, we have lost an inordinate amount of seagrass in the past century. There is a PhD, or she's defended her PhD, and actually her paper has just been accepted for publication. So that I can share that once it comes out. But over the past century, we have lost up to 92% of seagrass meadows around the UK. If you think about the UK has basically gone through an industrial revolution. Water quality of a lot of our major estuaries plummeted at the tail end of the 1800s and the early 1900s. And a lot of work has been done in the past 20 years to improve water quality, but the historical legacy of that poor water quality lives on today. So what Alex did is she looked back and looked at historical distribution of seagrass meadows around the UK. There's not always that much data, but where there is data, you can extrapolate based upon historical distribution and then compare that with today's distribution. And she's estimated that, well, as you see there, model loss of 89.4, that figure is actually from when she was doing the work. It can be anything up to 92% of our seagrass meadows. If we've lost 92%, that is awful. But even if if I was standing here saying we lost 20 or 40%, that was still a horrific amount of seagrass loss, considering the benefits it brings. And so based upon that, we need to have a concerted effort to restore seagrass, not the scale that we've been doing, but at a scale which is above and beyond what we first thought was possible. So I'm going to speak to you about 2 hectares of restoration today. And if we've only got 8,600 hectares now, and it used to be at 76,000 hectares, we've got a long way to go. So I'll come back to that. So restoration provides a means of reversing this loss. And really, it's the science behind it isn't all that complicated. Seagrass is a plant, so it grows from seed, and all we're looking to do is collect seeds and plant them. So we're basically underwater gardening. There's a little bit more to it than that, but that's the basic premise. All we're looking to do is to do it at a way which maximizes the growth of those plants and is scalable. So you'll all know from your own experience, I seem to kill pot plants all the time, which isn't probably a good advert for me being a restoration expert, but depending upon where you put your plants and depending upon where you plant your seeds will depend upon how successful they are at germinating. So you put them in the wrong place and they're not going to germinate. And so there is a science behind where we put the plants and where we put the seeds. But once the seeds are there, nature takes care of the rest. About 5 or 6 years ago now, we started experimenting on a very small scale, 20 or 30 bags at a time, with different techniques for looking at how do we restore seagrass in the UK. We've long admired some work which has been done by a guy called Bob Orth over in Chesapeake Bay in the States. And he's actually published a paper this year where they've planted, I think, something like 70 million seeds over the past 20 years. And from those 70 million seeds, they've got 36 kilometers squared of new seagrass meadows. So that's the kind of scale we want to replicate here in the UK. But unfortunately, Chesapeake Bay and the southwest coast of the UK are very different environments. In the southwest of the UK, we've got very high tidal ranges, a lot of water moving around. We're exposed to the Atlantic. And so we had to adjust some of the methods that they were using over there to make them work in the UK. So what we've essentially developed is a bespoke method for seagrass restoration in the UK. So to give you a bit of a Seagrass 101 to explain how this happens, if we look at this diagram or this photo in the top left, that's Zoster marina flowering. Now it doesn't look like a flower you'd buy from a shop, but those little protrusions are the flowers of the seagrass. And once they get pollinated, then they'll produce these seeds. And the seeds occur in these pods, we call them these spathes, but you might get, let's say, 8 of these seeds in each of those pods, and you might get 5 pods on a plant. So you might be getting 40 seeds on every blade of, on every plant in a meadow. And all we're looking to do is to snap off those pods and separate the seeds out, like we see down here, because it's those seeds that have the opportunity to go on to grow to become a plant again in the future. So the key thing here, again, I'll come back to this, is we've got to think big. When we were trialing our seagrass restoration methods, and we were planting 20 or 30 bags at a time, if you can think about that realistically, if you walk out into a bay and you plant 20 bags of seagrass, it's going to have 0 impact on the bay. You know, the water, the amount of water moving around is still going to be the same. You know, seagrass is buffer wave energy. So if you've got an extensive seagrass meadow with all those blades protruding up into the water column, then when a wave comes in, it takes all the energy out of the wave. So by thinking at scale and restoring a football pitch or 2 football pitches worth of seagrass, you're actually changing the environment. You're being an ecosystem engineer, and that brings benefits. So if you look at this graph on the left, if you've got less than 100 seeds, survival is very, very low. But as you increase the number of seeds, survival goes up. And if you look at the growth rate of plants as well, again, if you've only got a few seeds in your bay, then growth rate tends to be very low, because those plants are exposed, they're getting battered by the waves and the surrounding energies. But if you can completely convert the environment and transform that environment, then the growth rate goes up, because I guess like penguins in a huddle, or in this case, seagrass plants in the middle of a seagrass meadow, they're protected by the environment you've created. So scale is key. And what we were looking for was, how can we need some funding, essentially, and someone to believe in this method to scale it and to prove that it does work. The science behind that is pretty much this. So if you look at A here, when you've got seagrass, then you've got less suspended sediment in the water column, because the seagrass takes the energy out of the water column, and the sediment falls down and gets trapped between the blades of seagrass, which means you get clearer water, you get more light penetration, and also you get all the benefits of the seagrass oxidizing the sediment and stabilizing sediment and binding that seafloor together. That environment that's created also creates an environment for small epiphytes and isopods and gastropods and juvenile fish and everything else. It creates instead of having a murky water column, you've got this crystal clear water column and an abundance of life that goes with that. If we are to rip up all of the seagrass, though, then suddenly you move to this unvegetated substrate state, which you see on the right here, where you've got sediment that can be resuspended. You also get nutrients which come out of the sediment, which get resuspended. That's available for phytoplankton. Therefore, you get the green phytoplankton blooms, and therefore the amount of light that can penetrate the water column decreases. And basically, you've got this regime shift, or you're moving from 2 different states, from being a seagrass meadow state to a bare sediment state. And what we're trying to essentially do is to bring it back from being a bare sediment state into this seagrass state. So move from B to A. So how do we do it? So Seagrass Ocean Rescue, which is what I'm going to talk you through now, is or was, because we're about to finish in April, this 2 hectare project. The millionth seed actually went in November, and so we do have now 2 hectares of freshly planted seagrass or seeds growing in Dale, which is amazing. But it was conceptualized over planting these 2 hectares, so 2 rugby pitches or 2 football pitches, whatever your sport is, worth of seagrass. The first part of that is trying to work out how you're going to plant and how many seeds do you need. So we've been planting seagrass at 1 meter intervals. So you have 1 bag, then you'll have a gap of 1 meter, then you have another bag, and then you'll have a gap of 1 meter, and then you'll have another bag. And the reason being for this is that seagrass grows rhizomatically. So from the original plant, it will produce a rhizome, basically a side shoot, and then another plant will grow, and then another side shoot, and another plant will grow. So over the next 5 years, if you've got 1 bag here and another bag here a meter apart, these 2 plants will grow together to fill in the meadow. So as it stands at the moment, if you were to fly a drone over, the meadow, you see these isolated patches 1 metre apart. But if we were to go back there in 3 or 4 years' time, you'll see something more akin to what we're seeing on the left-hand side here, which is this continuous seagrass meadow. So the picking start part of the process happens every summer. So again, we're working with nature here. The seagrass plant will start producing seeds depending upon the latitude, but in those summer months. So I think the earliest seeds we started picking were in the Scilly Isles or maybe Jersey or Guernsey. And I think that was early July, moving through Cornwall in sort of mid-July, end of July. In Wales, the first 2 weeks of August, and if we do any picking this summer in Scotland, we're estimating that's going to be sort of mid to end of August, just following the latitude and basically the timing of the plants. On the right hand side here, you see those spades that I was talking about. So you can see each of those individual seeds in the spade, and that seed could go on to become a plant in the future. So what we're doing is we're essentially going through that meadow and just picking all the seeds, all the seed spades, all the seed shoots, and then collecting them, and we're going to process them in the lab. For Seagrass Ocean Rescue, because we were taking seeds from England and from Wales, and my daughter's joining us on the call, from England and from Wales and from the Channel Islands and from, hello, yes, you, from the basically all over the UK apart from Scotland, we needed to make sure that there was biosecurity. Hun, Iron's come to join me on the call. SJ, yeah. Could you come and grab Iona for a second, please? Okay, sorry. You can help it. You can help if you want. Sorry. Thank you.
Who are you?
Sorry for that little interlude. So because we were collecting seeds from all over the UK, apart from Scotland, we needed to make sure there was a biosecurity element. So we need to make sure that there was no nasties, potentially diseases or anything like that, which could be transferred to this new meadow. So all of these seeds were collected and then they were then processed in the labs at Swansea University. So this is a pretty stinky job, but basically what you're looking to do is you're looking to allow the plant material surrounding the seeds to rot away, and to mimic basically what would happen in nature, and the seeds will then drop out. So if you can see here, you can see the seeds in amongst the, so on the left hand side here in the photo, in his hands, you can see the seeds, and then the spades, the plant material rotting away around the outside. And we've got a sieve here, so you can sieve through and separate the seeds from the rest of the plant material. And we've also got these bubbling water columns. So again, the seeds will sort of drop out and separate from the rotting plant. And so we have to do this with huge vats of these spades. But it's at that point as well, though, that we're able to sterilize the mixture of all the different seeds from all over the UK, so that when we're putting them out, we're not transferring any of these nasty pathogens. The next stage then is packing. So once we've got our vast numbers of seeds, and so over the 2 years of the project, and over those 2 hectares, we did 1 million seeds. We're actually putting 50 seeds in any given bag. So the reason why we're putting 50 seeds in any bag is because not all seeds will germinate. In fact, there's a very, very low success rate in germination. It can be as low as 5%. But basically, by putting 50 seeds in, we're guaranteeing, if there's a germination rate of 5% as a minimum, that every single bag will germinate, pretty much, if that makes sense. So then when you're putting your bags at 1 metre, you can guarantee we're going to get a hit, and we're going to get one plant growing, at least one plant growing every metre. Often it might be 3 or 4, in which case that particular patch has got a head start, but at least we can guarantee then, or as close to guarantee as possible, full coverage. So the processing stage, so we did the picking stage in the summer, first 2 weeks of August, and then through August and September, we do this processing stage where we separate the seeds from the rest of the plant material. And then in October or November, generally speaking, we will then put these seeds into these Hessian bags. The Hessian bags are biodegradable, so they rot away in the sediment, but they also protect the seeds from crabs and predation. And inside there is, again, some inert sand. So if in your head, if you think of like builder's sand or child's play sand, it's just sand, which has got no microbial content in it. So again, in terms of what we're adding to the environment, it's just sterilized seeds and sterilized sand in a Hessian bag. So we're not interfering. The environment will supply the microbes. There is some work and some treatment being done to try and better understand the role of the microbiota, the role of microbes in terms of making, perhaps increasing the efficacy of germination, or, you know, there's still a lot of things we don't know there about how we can improve this and improve the rates of germination. But that's the current process from a biosecurity perspective. And then once you've got all your bags packed with their 50 seeds in each, like you see on the right hand side here, we put these into these boxes and we attach them on. Or for this Seagrass Ocean Rescue, this is how we did this. We put it on this sisal rope. And again, the rope we will remove the following summer, but we attach them at every metre. So every metre, you've got a bag of seagrass seeds, which will then germinate. And then those are deployed. So they're deployed off the side of a rib. And if you see here on it's quite a community-led effort, which is quite cool, but our team who are on the rib will have these boxes, and they'll following the GPS on the boat, they'll drop off these bags of seagrass seeds, and they'll run them in lines along the seabed. So they'll run 100 meters long, drop down a meter, run 100 meter back, drop down, and so on and so forth. And that's how we will essentially cover that large area of subtidal seagrass. Ongoing then is the survey and monitoring side of that. So we need to prove that this has been successful, that this works. Did last year, we weren't able to get out straight away and do our initial survey and monitoring because of COVID. But when we were able to get in, this is one of the dive team checking in on one of the bags. And if you can have a look at this photo, you can see the rope sort of going from the bottom left through to the top right. So you can see from this bag, there's been 2 successful germinations. We've got 2 plants here, just off shot under Blaise Bullimor's name. There'll be another bag there, and that will have, again, germination success. And then in the dark, behind the diver, just further down the rope there, there'll also be another bag. And so what we're going to look to do is we're going to monitor this meadow over the coming years and see obviously how it grows and expands to fill that space. But also there's lots of interest in terms of how much carbon does a new meadow store. And so, you know, if we can get a baseline figures here for how much carbon's in the sediment, and then compare that to 10 years time, we can work out how much carbon has been stored by this meadow. And then also increases in biodiversity. So we can have a look at the biodiversity of what was basically a sandy bottom, and then come back to that in 5, 10, 15 years time, and then look at the species that we're finding in the area then. And undoubtedly we'll see increased amounts of carbon sequestered, increased amounts of biodiversity, probably some commercially important fish species. And one of the things we'll definitely see is that sediment stabilization, because as the roots and rhizomes bind the sediment together, the water quality or the water clarity will improve. So that's a whistle-stop tour. You're probably thinking, why is what Scotland's doing something different? Scotland's got a different legal system and various other different legislative bodies, and so we've been working in Wales for 10 years, and so working in Wales and England is basically working, that all fits nicely together, but we have to do the same. I guess we proof of concept again for Scotland. I've been working closely with Nature Scot and the Orbitant Garden Edinburgh to address some of the research gaps. And Nature Scot are very keen on nature-based solutions, and so they see this as an opportunity for using nature to combat climate change and to bring nature back, biodiversity back. So currently, as I say, collaborating with those and trying to basically replicate what we've been doing down south up here in Scotland. So yes, I'm optimistic about the next sort of 10 years in the UK in terms of seagrass restoration. And part of some quite exciting, one of the conversations, or a big part of the conversations we're having up here, is not about individual habitat restoration, although I'm a seagrass scientist and I want to restore seagrass, but working with other experts to restore seascapes. So planting seagrass meadows adjacent to mussel beds, oyster reefs, and actually then the benefits you're going to get from having all those habitats connected will far outweigh the benefits of restoring a habitat on its own in isolation. Okay, that's pretty much the presentation. So I'll stop the screen share there. And if any of you guys have got any questions, fire away.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Lilley. This was very informative, and also thank you for the special guest appearance from your daughter.
Yeah, no worries. She does this quite a lot. She comes in and yeah, little charmer.
Well, to be honest, the first time I heard about seagrass was just last week when we had our first event of the lecture series, and it really is a shame when you know how important they are. So thank you very much for the work you're doing.
Oh, pleasure. Pleasure, guys.
Okay, so I'll just move on to the questions. Again, just as a reminder, you can use the raise your hand option, or you can write down your questions in the chat. So we have a question from Donata, right?
Yes. Hi. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
I just had a question because so I grew up in the Philippines where mangroves are quite important, but climate change is having an impact on them. So I was just wondering to what extent seagrass is impacted by climate change, or is it quite resilient to any temperature changes?
Good question. So that is a very sort of place-specific answer there. So there's some shallow lagoons where if there's been too high an increase in the temperature, then that is having a very negative impact on seagrass meadows. But seagrass meadows, by their very nature, are plants that take carbon dioxide out of the water, or carbon out of the water column for photosynthesis. And so in some cases, having enhanced levels of carbon dioxide actually improve growth rates. And I know that carbon dioxide and temperature aren't directly linked, but this whole climate change issue is quite a complex one for seagrass meadows. In terms of the Philippines, there's one of the challenges we've had specifically around the Philippines and some of the mangrove restoration that's happening globally is mangroves are actually being restored on top of seagrass meadows. So you're essentially replacing one habitat with another rather than thinking about the seascape element. And that's not unique to the Philippines. You know, we see this in the UK as well, where we've had misguided tree planting schemes. Now, just planting trees need to be planted in areas which are receptive to trees and where the benefits of planting trees are going to be beneficial, rather than just planting trees willy-nilly across the landscape. So there needs to be a coordinated, I guess, an evidence-based approach to restoration, and the challenge of that is marrying that with scale. One of the opportunities I see for seagrass restoration in the UK, especially up here in Scotland, where there's a coastal community network of 18 super passionate, super motivated coastal community groups who are all keen to restore their environment and to get involved and to jump, you know, to bring nature back. But it's about providing them with the harnessing that energy and saying, absolutely, you're more than capable of doing all of this stuff. You know, you're just as capable as anyone, but basically providing the scientific link and saying, well, actually, what we've learned from our own experiences, these are some of the mistakes that perhaps we've made in the past, and we just don't want those to be replicated. So, so yeah, it's complex. It's probably the most accurate and shortest answer there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your answer. So we have another question from Julia.
Thank you so much for your presentation. It was very interesting. So I have two questions. So the first one would be, what are the costs of planting seagrass? So is it cost effective? Do you see a lot of loss? And the second one would be, I did my undergrad in Long Island in the States, and one of the biggest problems was flooding. And we were looking into what kind of things that could have been done to kind of prevent that in the coast. And one of the things was planting trees so that the roots could kind of prevent flooding. Do you think that seagrass could be used to prevent a too strong of a wave to come on the shore? Do you think that's a thing that could happen?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it is, you know, we see this, especially, so again, seagrasses is quite, one of the challenges with communicating seagrass science is that we have, as like I said in the presentation, you have seagrasses which are tiny, like very, very small, maybe 2 centimeters or 3 centimeters tall, and they'll do nothing to buffer wave action. But then you'll also have seagrasses which are over 1 meter tall, and that the drag that a leaf of or like, you know, thousands of seagrass blades create really does buffer the wave energy. And we're having this discussion here in the UK as well around, you know, dynamic coastlines. Like historically, we put concrete barriers up to sort of protect the coast, and then they break down and we have to rebuild them. Whereas we've got the solutions in nature. You know, if you can realign certain parts of the coastline, plant salt marsh, plant seagrass meadows, plant trees on the edge of the salt marsh, and allow those natural dune systems to form, then nature's going to do all that stuff for us. With the added benefit of all those ecosystem services of like sequestering carbon and bringing back biodiversity, et cetera, et cetera. So nature-based solutions collectively have a big role to play. And I think it's collectively, we need to work together as habitat specialists to think about restoring in that seascape context. So, well, that connected seascape landscape context. So I absolutely do think seagrass has a role to play there, because it helps bind the sediment and helps buffer that wave energy. But the way that's going to be effective is working with, you know, the salt marsh specialists, you know, the other oyster reef and mussel bed specialists, to think about how we can regenerate the entire seascape and allow nature to do what it does very well.
Julia, I think you have the second question, and then I see the questions in the chat. I haven't forgotten about you, so after Julia's second question, I'll move on to that.
Yeah, my second question would just be the costs of.
Oh yeah, costs, absolutely. So yeah, so one of the things the issue is, that's the other thing, is at the moment seagrass restoration is expensive. Like going back to the beginning of the presentation, I spoke about this. There's 2 species of seagrass. There's Zostra nautai and Zostra marina, and what we're focusing our energies on Zostra marina restoration. But Zostra marina in nature is often found sort of side by side with nautai. So you tend to find nautai higher up on the intertidal, and then you might find Zostra marina a little bit further down. But there's often an area where they're sort of intermixed. It's like a mixed meadow. And so there is a place for seagrass restoration of Zostra marina, but in that intertidal zone. So what we've done is plant 2 hectares of seagrass underwater. And if you're doing anything underwater, any sort of work at sea is just expensive. But there are ways to reduce cost. One is to engage communities as well, actually. One is to plant on the intertidal. So if you walk out at a low tide, and a very low tide, like a low spring tide, then, you know, that might be under 1 meter or 2 meters of water, depending on where you are in the country. And so, you know, restoration, then you're not having to have the dive boats and the licenses and the insurance and everything else, and that will rapidly decrease the costs. But also another element is scale. So some of the stuff that we're looking to develop over the next 10 years is a seagrass nursery. So essentially growing seagrass like you would do a crop like wheat or rice, growing it on land in salt tanks, and then being able to harvest whatever but you can control the entire environment then. So if we wanted, I don't know, 100,000 of the Argyle type seed, we can then produce that and then use that for restoration in Argyle, or, you know, the Essex type seed, or whatever we might need to do. So one is scaling the amount of seeds we collect. Part of that could also be through a mechanization process of the collection side of things. So rather than getting divers to hand pick seeds, and that's why I refer to it as underwater gardening, we need to be thinking about underwater farming if we're going to restore 30 kilometers of seagrass. But then also this automated planting process. So there's a team of master's engineers up here at Edinburgh University who are developing basically a little robot that will crawl along the seabed and inject seeds into the sediment. So again, it would do away with the need for divers to go and do that, or to roll it off the side of the boat. But to give you a ballpark figure, for 1 hectare of seagrass restoration, at the moment it costs, or it did cost, that first project was £200,000. But in that £200,000, it's the first time it was done. We needed to build the aquaria and get the sort of infrastructure, the upfront capital costs are involved in that as well. So if we were to replicate it now, it would be much cheaper. And if we're able to replicate it at scale, it brings, economies of scale, it brings costs down again. So it's not prohibitively expensive, but it's way more expensive than it needs to be to make this really scalable.
Thank you very much. So I'll move on to the questions on the chat. So we have a question from Sharon Hall, and she's asking, do you think many people in the UK know that we have seahorses here? I used to think it was more in tropical areas. Could promoting this more raise more awareness about seagrass? What else can we do to promote literacy about this?
Yeah, okay, so I guess the famous seagrass meadow seahorse combination is a place called Studland Bay, and that's down in Dorset on the south coast of England. But along that south coast of Cornwall and Devon, where you've got quite an active, I guess, marine community, active water users, people spend a lot of time in the sea. Then obviously, if you spend more time in the sea, you're more likely to see seahorses. And in that area, seahorses have been used as a hook. There's something called a coastal, what was that called? Community Seagrass Initiative, ran for a few years. I think it ended 2 years ago. It must have been 4 years or so, 3 or 4 years of funding before that. And on their website and in their logo and everything else, they were using seahorses as that hook to get people interested about seagrass. Elsewhere in the UK, it's been difficult to evidence seahorse presence, and that's not because they're not there. If I speak to scuba divers and marine users up here, they might say they've seen seahorses on a dive, but having someone in the water with a good camera to take a photo of a seahorse and then to share that information is challenging. And so it's very hard then to use the seahorses as a lever for getting people interested in seagrass. The other side of that is, and we see this throughout the sort of conservation world, is it's all well and good using individual species as a way of getting people interested. But what we really need to think about is the fabric of nature, and the fabric of nature are the habitats. They're the boring stuff. It's the fields of the meadows we see on land. We've lost a lot of our sort of wildflower meadows. It's the grass. I mean, I'm talking about grass here that grows in the sea. It's just green grass that grows in the sea, basically. To most people, that's what it is. And it's the fact that is what that represents is so much more than that one species. And I think if we can start getting people to think about landscape scale and seascape scale and thinking about nature holistically, rather than saying, you only really care about protecting the seahorse, then that's the kind of, in my mind, the sort of narrative shift that we need to think about. And I think we are getting there. I think COVID, in fact, in many respects, has connected people with nature in a way that perhaps they weren't doing so much before. And so I think they're seeing these holistic benefits. And I think it's about, I guess, capitalizing on that.
Okay, thank you very much. I think maybe we've got more questions than we have time for.
Well, I've got Grace's here and Alison's. I've got a board meeting, guys, in 4 minutes, but I'll try and whistle stop through these two.
Okay,
do we collaborate with communities or authorities? This is something that we're working on, and actually I've got a bid in at the moment to work with a coastal community group in Scotland. You should check them out. If you type in seawilding.org, Seawilding is their charity. The community group is actually known as Cromac, but they've restored native oysters and then want to now do seagrass meadows. A phenomenal group of individuals, and the nice thing there is it's a community who wants to make the change in their own local patch, and there's nothing better than that. So going back to this idea of we can just show them what we've done and provide the science, but they've got the energy and they've got the drive to make the change in their own marine environment. And does the local fishing industry cause any issues for you? The fishermen get a lot of bad press, and not all. There are some who do cause trouble, but there are some absolute stars out there who are really keen. They care about the sea fundamentally because it's their livelihood. And so some of the fishermen that we've worked with in Dale for example, are top fishers, and really believe in what we're trying to do as well. And so I know that they often get smeared in the press, and there are certain individuals within the industry, like there is in any industry, which cause a lot of that bad press. But certainly a lot of the small scale creel fishermen, small scale boats that we work with, are really on board with trying to make sure that the seas are looked after. And greetings from Swansea, at least 2 of us from the Greenpeace group attending. Does it matter whether seeds, say, from Scotland are sown in another area, and where is the next area to be sown after Dale? Okay, so we're looking at sites in North Wales. So we've gone from 2 hectares in Dale. We're looking to scale to 10 hectares in North Wales. We're looking at, we're creating a habitat suitability model with a social model overlaid on top of that to see where would be best. And we're actually working with the special areas of conservation in both Penllyn SAC in North Wales and Pembrokeshire SAC in South Wales to identify future restoration sites. And there's also work which I think is public now, but it's about to be public, in the Solent in England. So there's those 2, and as I say, there's early conversations for sites elsewhere in the UK. So yes, there's definitely more places after Dale, and it doesn't matter whether seeds from Scotland are sown in another area. This depends upon the regulators. So we're working collectively, I guess. So Nature Scot and Marine Scotland, Natural Resources Wales, Natural England, and the Environment Agency are all working on some like seagrass restoration guidelines, which will help inform that sort of overarching strategy, because the different regulators have different responsibilities from different areas of the countries, and so ask me again in 12 months' time. That's probably where I'll leave that. And then what pollinates seagrass, I'll send a link round for that. But so guys, please feel free to get in contact with me. You can share my email. I'm on Twitter at rjlilley, Instagram at rjlilley. We've got projectseagrass.org as our website, seagrassspotter.org is our citizen science platform, seagrass.org.uk is our restoration site. But just please feel free to reach out and ask any questions you do have. But I'm afraid I'm going to have to go because I've got a board meeting.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll be sharing all your information on our social media pages. So if you guys want to have that, just check us out. And again, thank you very much. And
absolute pleasure, guys. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry to run.
It's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye.